They say every man has a breaking point. I didn't think I had one, not really. I always figured if I kept my head down, stayed consistent, and did right by people, especially the woman I married, life would return the favor. But life doesn't work like that. People don't work like that. My name's Malik Ford. I'm 34 years old, and I run a small but steady auto repair shop in Birmingham. I started as an apprentice when I was 17, sweeping up grease and doing oil changes, and now I've got a decent garage with my name on the front. Nothing fancy. We don't have leather couches or marble floors like some dealerships. But we do honest work, and people trust us. That's always meant something to me, being dependable. Being steady. My wife, Sierra, well, she used to say she liked that about me. She's 32, works as a receptionist at a dental clinic uptown. The kind of woman who fills a room as soon as she walks in, not with elegance, but with noise. She talks fast, laughs loud, tells stories that always end in someone being embarrassed. At first, I thought it was charming. I was the quiet one. She was the spark. It balanced out. She got me out of my shell a bit, and I gave her somewhere calm to land when the world got loud. But something shifted over time. Maybe it happened slowly, in small ways I didn't catch. Maybe it was always there, and I just didn't want to see it. At first, her jokes were light, harmless little digs about how I snore or how I wear the same 3 shirts every week. I laughed along, trying not to make a big deal out of it. I figured that's just how she communicated. But eventually, the jabs got sharper, more public, more humiliating. One day, she joked at a cookout that I was basically a human wrench. I remember her laughing as people chuckled, and I just stood there, barbecue tongs in hand, pretending I hadn't just been reduced to a tool. But I let it slide. Again, that was always my move. Let it slide. Don't cause a scene. Don't ruin the mood. Don't embarrass her, even when she had no problem embarrassing me. And believe me, I wanted to believe it was just her way. That deep down, she still respected me. That it was all in good fun. But lately, I started to notice how differently she treated me compared to other people. When we were alone, she barely listened. Always on her phone. Always distracted. But let one of her friends call, and suddenly she was bubbly and warm. Full of life. Like I was a placeholder until someone more interesting called in. It wasn't about love anymore. It was about convenience. Still, I didn't speak up. I just kept fixing engines, saving money, cooking dinner most nights. I figured maybe we were just in a rut. Maybe she'd come around. Maybe one day she'd realize I was the one holding everything together. Then came the night that changed everything. We were sitting on the couch, quiet. TV playing something neither of us was watching. She scrolled her phone like she always did, occasionally giggling at something on Instagram. I asked if she wanted anything to eat. She didn't respond. I asked again, and she waved me off like I was a fly. That's when it hit me. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was background noise. Furniture with a wallet and a car jack. I didn't say anything then either. But something in me, it broke open that night. Not loudly. Quietly. Like a small crack in a windshield that starts to spread slowly, quietly, until one day the whole thing shatters. The next morning, I got up early, went to the shop, and sat in my office alone before the crew arrived. I just sat there in the silence, thinking about how I'd gotten here. About how I could work a 12-hour shift rebuilding someone's transmission and still come home to a woman who didn't see me, didn't respect me, didn't even pretend to anymore. I stared at the shop walls. The framed photos, the certifications, the little handwritten thank you notes from loyal customers. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't invisible. Just to her. That's when I called Janelle. She's a lawyer a friend of mine recommended, sharp, calm, professional. I didn't tell anyone about it. Not even my brother. I just started the process. Quietly. Carefully. I made sure everything was lined up. Finances, house deed, business accounts. I had no intention of yelling or throwing anything. That wasn't me. I just needed to be ready when the day came. And that day would come sooner than I thought. But before all that, before the dinner, before the fallout, before the courtroom, I had to admit something hard to myself. Sierra didn't love me anymore. Or maybe she never did. Not the way I needed to be loved. Maybe I was just a safe bet. Someone who wouldn't cheat, wouldn't yell, wouldn't leave. Someone who'd fix her car, pay the bills, and stay quiet while she played the lead role in our life together. The word settled kept ringing in my head. I'd heard her say it once, quietly, on the phone with her friend. She said she'd settled young and didn't think life would feel so boring at 32. She didn't know I heard that. But I did. And I didn't scream or storm out. I just took a breath and went outside. Walked around the block like I always did when I needed to calm my thoughts. I wasn't mad. I was disappointed and tired. So tired of carrying a marriage that only worked when I stayed silent. So I stopped being silent. That week, I told Janelle to file the divorce papers. I asked if we could time delivery for a specific night, a dinner we were invited to with friends. She raised an eyebrow, but I explained the plan. She agreed. She even smiled a little. And I went home that night feeling oddly calm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to choose me. I had finally chosen myself. I should have known it was going to be a disaster from the moment Sierra walked into the bedroom and asked, "You gonna wear that?" I looked down at my plain black button-up and jeans. Clean, pressed, nothing fancy. But it was me. "Yeah," I said. "What's wrong with it?" She shrugged, more smirk than smile. "Nothing. It's just dinner with people who actually have style." I didn't argue. I never did. I just nodded and grabbed my wallet. We were already running late, and I knew better than to start a fight that would ruin her vibe before she got to show off for her friends. Dinner was at this new fusion place downtown, one of those restaurants where the portions are small and the lighting makes you feel like you're in a music video. Jade and Daryl were already there when we arrived. I liked them. They were the only couple we knew who seemed like they actually liked each other. Then there was Candace, loud, always performing, always trying to make everything a scene. And her latest conquest, some dude she brought named Malik Jr. That part wasn't a joke. That was his real name. I half laughed when I shook his hand and said, "Well, that's going to get confusing." He didn't laugh. Anyway, we all sat down, ordered drinks. The waiter came with that fake friendly energy, describing every dish like it was the cure for sadness. Sierra leaned forward, giggling at every word, trying to charm the table like she was auditioning for something. I sat quiet, sipping water, trying to enjoy the food, the atmosphere, anything really. I didn't mind being the quiet one. Not everyone needed to be loud. Someone had to listen, right? The conversation bounced around from work to weekend plans to that viral video everyone was talking about. Then it shifted to relationships. That's when things got tricky. Candace leaned back and said, "Why is it that the sweetest men are always the worst in bed?" She said it like she was delivering the punchline of a joke she'd told 100 times. Sierra laughed hard, too hard, then took a long sip of her wine. And then she said it. "That's Malik. Sweet as pie, but, let's just say, I definitely settled for less." She said it like it was no big deal, like she was reading off a menu. And then she laughed again. Everyone froze. I mean, it was like someone hit pause on the night. The waiter walking by slowed his step. Jade stopped chewing. Daryl looked straight at me, unsure what he should do. Candace, for once, actually looked uncomfortable. Even Malik Jr. shifted in his seat. Sierra was still laughing when she noticed no one else was. "What?" she said, glancing around the table. "It's just a joke." But it wasn't. Not to me. I felt the blood drain from my face. My first instinct was to stand up and walk out. My second was to laugh it off and keep the peace like I always did. But I didn't do either of those things. Instead, I set my fork down gently. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just done. I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman I'd loved. This woman I'd stood by through every meltdown, every rent crisis, every late-night dental job she hated. This woman I'd let turn me into a punchline because I thought that was love. "Funny you mentioned that," I said, calm as rain. "You've already been served. The divorce papers are in your inbox." Silence. Not just awkward silence. Heavy. Final. She blinked at me. Thought I was kidding. I could see it in her face, waiting for me to crack a smile, say I was joking, throw my arm around her, and tell everyone we were just playing. But I wasn't playing. I pushed my chair back. Slowly. I folded my napkin and placed it next to my half-eaten plate. I stood up, straightened my shirt. Sierra finally laughed, shaky, nervous. "Stop. You're being dramatic." I didn't respond. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I didn't need to. My silence was loud enough. Daryl cleared his throat, like he wanted to say something but didn't know what. Jade just stared, eyes wide, hand frozen near her wine glass. It was Candace, surprisingly, who broke the tension. She looked at Sierra and said quietly, "That's not true. Don't do that." I nodded at her, grateful in a way I couldn't explain. And then I left. I didn't slam the door. I didn't storm out. I walked, steady, out of the restaurant, into the night air. The cool breeze hit me like a second wind. I stood by my truck for a moment, breathing deep, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. I didn't look. I knew what it would be: texts, missed calls, voicemails that sounded more like guilt than apology. She'd call me sensitive, say it was a joke, tell me I'd overreacted, try to flip the story like she always did. But it was too late for that. I got in the truck, turned the key, and just sat there for a minute. I stared at my hands on the wheel, grease under the nails, rough skin from years of honest labor. Hands that built engines, paid bills, cooked dinners. Hands that were never enough for the woman sitting across from me at that table. I drove home in silence. No music, just the hum of the road and the steady beat of my heart, louder now that I'd stopped ignoring it. When I walked through the door of our house, no, my house, it felt different. Still, empty, but not in a bad way, just honest. I poured myself a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, and finally opened her messages. What the hell was that? You embarrassed me. You really sent divorce papers? Over a joke? Call me. Now. I didn't respond. Instead, I typed one message and hit send. Now you know how it feels. I turned off the lights, sat in the dark for a long time, just breathing. The dinner had tasted like salt and humiliation, but the silence that followed, that tasted like freedom. I always thought when a marriage ends, there's some kind of explosion, some dramatic finale where everything burns and you walk away from the ashes with tears in your eyes. But it didn't happen like that. Not for me. The night I left that restaurant, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't second-guess myself. I just drove home, walked into my house, and sat in the dark. There was something peaceful about it, like finally putting down a heavy load I'd been carrying too long. The kind of peace that doesn't feel good right away, just quiet. Still, my phone lit up nonstop for the next few hours. Sierra tried calling, texted over and over again. You really did that? Come on, that wasn't serious. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Talk to me. I didn't answer. I just sat at the table, listening to the silence. That night, I slept in the guest room. I knew she'd come home eventually, drunk, confused, still believing this was some kind of punishment. I'd walk back. But I didn't want to see her. Not yet. I didn't want to hear excuses or jokes or some half-hearted attempt to twist the story in her favor. When I woke up the next morning, her car was in the driveway. She was home. I walked into the kitchen, half expecting to find her cooking breakfast like nothing happened. But the place was empty. Too quiet. No music. No phone speaker playing her gossip podcasts. Just stillness. On the counter was her phone, face down, buzzing every now and then. I opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and leaned against the counter. That's when she walked in. Hair tied up. No makeup. Eyes puffy like she hadn't slept much. You really didn't come back to the table, she said, voice low. You just left. I sipped the water. That's right. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. Like the man standing in front of her wasn't the one who always fixed her car when it made a noise, who remembered her dentist meetings, who rubbed her shoulders when her back ached. You filed for divorce? She asked. Seriously. I did, I said. Weeks ago. Silence. The kind that feels sharp. I was joking, she said finally. Everyone jokes. You took it too personally. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. That was always the pattern. She'd do something cruel, call it a joke, and then blame me for not laughing. It stopped being funny a long time ago, I said quietly. You just didn't notice because you stopped listening. She crossed her arms. You blindsided me. In front of my friends? I set the bottle down. You humiliated me. In front of our friends. That wasn't humiliation. It was a joke. No, I said, stepping past her. It was the last straw. She didn't follow me. Just stood there like someone had knocked the breath out of her. I went to the shop that morning like I always did. Opened up, checked the schedule, greeted the guys. Everything looked the same. But something in me was different. Like I'd finally come out from under a weight I forgot I was carrying. I was halfway through a break job when Daryl showed up. Hey, he said, standing awkwardly by the entrance. You got a minute? I nodded and wiped my hands. We sat on a couple of folding chairs near the bay doors. He looked nervous, like he didn't know whether to speak or just apologize for being there. I just wanted to say. I didn't laugh, he said. When she said that, I didn't think it was funny. I know. He ran a hand through his hair. Man, that was rough. You handled it better than I ever could have. I didn't want to make a scene. He shook his head. You didn't. She did. And I know Jade's been thinking about it too. Sierra crossed a line, and everyone saw it. I'm done, I said simply. There's nothing left to fight for. He didn't argue. He just nodded, then said, if you ever need anything, let me know. That meant more than I could say. Because the truth was, when a marriage falls apart, people pick sides. They always do. And I wasn't sure who'd stick around. But Daryl didn't hesitate. That afternoon, Sierra texted again. This time it wasn't anger. It was confusion. Desperation. Can we just talk? I didn't know it bothered you this much. You're really walking away from this? But I didn't answer. Not yet. I wanted her to sit with the silence. The same silence I'd been living in for years while she laughed at my expense. The next day, my sister Rena came by. She didn't know the full story, just that something had gone down. I filled her in over coffee in the garage office. I watched her face shift from surprise to disbelief to quiet anger. She said that? In public? Rena asked, her voice tight. I nodded. You're better than me, she muttered. Because I would have flipped the whole damn table. I almost did, I said, managing a small smile. But I figured the silence would say more. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Good. You deserve someone who respects you. And if that ain't her, then let her go. I didn't say it out loud, but I already had. By the third day, the phone call stopped. The messages slowed. I think she realized I wasn't playing a game. That this wasn't about teaching her a lesson or making her beg. It was about freedom. I wasn't angry anymore. Not even hurt. I was just done. And honestly, that kind of peace is scary at first. You think there should be more pain, more drama. But instead, it's just quiet. Like standing in a house after a storm has passed and seeing what's left behind. That weekend, I drove out to the lake. Just me and the truck. No music. Just the wind through the windows. I sat on the hood, staring at the water, thinking about how much I gave to someone who never knew how to receive it. And then I thought about what I'd do next. Not just with Sierra, but with my life. Because the truth is, when someone treats you like an afterthought long enough, you start to believe you're disposable. That maybe you really aren't exciting or impressive or man enough. But out there by the water, I didn't feel small. I felt real. Leaving wasn't an impulse. People like to think that when a marriage ends, it's the result of one bad fight, one moment of rage or betrayal. But the truth? The decision to leave usually starts quietly. It's not one punch, it's 1,000 small paper cuts you learn to ignore until you can't anymore. That dinner was just the final cut. The truth is, I've been planning my exit for months. It started with a thought, sitting at the kitchen table one night while Sierra was laughing at her phone, showing me some TikTok where the punchline was a guy like me getting clowned by his girlfriend. She showed it to me, then laughed and said, "That's literally you." I didn't laugh. I just nodded. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about what it meant to be married to someone who didn't see me anymore. Not as a man, not as a partner, not as anything worth protecting. I started replaying moments, small things I'd let go. Birthdays she forgot. Times she left me waiting outside her job for 30 minutes because she lost track of time. Moments I showed up when she needed me, only to be brushed aside when I needed her. The next morning, I called Janelle Brewster. Janelle was a lawyer a friend referred me to months ago when I mentioned, half-jokingly, that I might need a back pocket plan. I never expected I'd actually call her. But I did. Calm. Clear. I told her I wasn't angry, I just wanted to be prepared in case things didn't turn around. She asked me questions. Was the house in both names? Who paid the mortgage? Did we have shared accounts? Any children? Any assets I needed protected? I answered everything. Slowly. Thoughtfully. She started the paperwork. For 3 months, I worked in silence. I met with Janelle once a week. We moved the house title into a trust under my name, legally airtight. My business accounts, tools, and properties were separated. Sierra never noticed. She didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer answers. Most nights, she was too distracted by group chats and reruns of reality shows to notice anything beyond her phone screen. I kept a journal. Not the kind you write poetry in, just notes. Dates. Come. That I wasn't walking away for nothing. One entry still sits fresh in my memory. March 17th, she told me I was the safe option. Like I was the coat she wears when it's cold but hides when the sun's out. It wasn't just what she said, it was how easily she said it. Like it was common sense. Like love was supposed to feel like settling. I started moving little things out of the house. Old tools. personal items, paperwork. Every time she went to her mom's or stayed late with her friends, I'd pack a small box and drop it off at a storage unit near the shop. Bit by bit, my life was relocating itself quietly, like a shadow slipping under a door. People don't always notice the man who's been silent for too long. They assume he's fine because he doesn't scream. They mistake stillness for weakness. But silence can be the strongest thing you own, especially when it's not coming from fear, but clarity. One evening, we were having dinner on the couch. Some frozen pasta she heated up while scrolling on her phone. She told me about how her coworker got dumped by text and how cruel it was. I remember her laughing, saying, "Can you imagine? Just being left without warning." I remember looking at her for a long second and saying, "Yeah, I can imagine." She didn't even look up. That was the moment I knew I was right to leave. Not because I hated her, but because I didn't want to become a version of myself that hated anything. The day I had the papers delivered, I was calm, focused. I had a meeting with Janelle that morning to go over final logistics. I signed the last set of documents in her office, and we both reviewed the timing. She asked if I was nervous. No, I said. I'm tired, but not nervous. We scheduled the delivery to hit her inbox at 8:15 p.m., right around the time the dinner would be winding down. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I just wanted her to feel the weight of her words in real time. To see what it looked like when someone refused to be the punchline anymore. On the way to dinner, she played music in the car, snapping selfies and tagging herself at the restaurant like it was a red carpet. She didn't notice I hadn't said much. She didn't ask if I was okay. She was too busy preparing her show for the table. And then she performed. You already know what she said. That I was sweet, but boring. That she settled. That I was terrible in bed. All for a cheap laugh. And when I told her she'd already been served, that it was already over, she looked shocked, genuinely stunned, as if it never crossed her mind that I'd be the one to leave. I think that's what hurt her the most, not the divorce itself, but the fact that I had the nerve to walk away without yelling, begging, or even warning her. But the thing about quiet exits? They don't give you time to prepare a defense. They just show you the mirror and leave. That night, after I left the restaurant, I didn't go home right away. I drove around for a bit, stopped at a 24-hour diner, had some coffee. The waitress called me sir and refilled my cup before I even asked. That simple gesture reminded me how easy respect is when people choose to give it. I watched couples come and go, some laughing, some silent, but all of them present, not scrolling, not mocking, just there. I envied that. I finished my coffee, left a generous tip, and headed home. I parked outside, looked at the house for a long time, then decided not to go inside. Not that night. I slept at the shop. Fold-out cot in the back room. Old blanket. One dim lamp. I slept better than I had in weeks. When the morning sun cracked through the blinds, I felt light. Free. Not because I hated my marriage, but because I finally realized it wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a performance, and I'd stopped playing the role. The fallout didn't come all at once. It came in waves. The kind that knock you off balance even when you're standing still. At first, it was just noise, phone calls at all hours, texts that shifted between anger and desperation, like she couldn't decide who to be. I didn't block her. I wanted her to know I saw every message and still chose silence. I'd wake up some mornings and see 10 missed calls. Then a message like, "So that's it? You're just gonna throw away years over one dinner?" Followed by, "I didn't even say anything that bad." And then, I was joking. Everyone knew I was joking. But if you have to keep telling someone it was a joke, maybe it wasn't funny. About a week after the dinner, Sierra showed up at my shop. I was under a car when I heard the door swing open. She didn't announce herself, just walked in like she still had a right to. She was dressed for war, tight dress, heels, a fresh blowout, and enough perfume to choke a horse. She always used her appearance as a weapon. When words failed, she turned to her looks, as if beauty could clean up damage she didn't want to admit to. I slid out from under the car, wiped my hands, and looked at her. "Can we talk?" she asked, arms crossed, eyes scanning the shop like she expected someone to jump in and cheer for her. "We are talking," I said, grabbing a towel and wiping grease from my knuckles. She stepped closer. "You really aren't going to take my calls?" "Nope." "Wow," she said, laughing under her breath. "So this is who you are now?" "No," I said, meeting her gaze. "This is who I've always been. You just stopped noticing." She blinked, like she didn't expect me to say that. Then her face shifted, less anger, more confusion. "I just came to say I'm sorry. that it came out like that. Came out. I echoed. Sierra, you looked me in the eye, surrounded by people we both know, and called me less. You said you settled. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? She hesitated, then deflected. Candace was egging me on. And the wine. Stop, I said. Stop blaming everyone but yourself. Candace didn't open your mouth for you. Wine didn't write the joke. That was you. That was your voice. Your choice. She didn't speak. I folded my arms, tired but steady. Why now? I asked. Why come here dressed like that? Acting like you care. She looked away. Because people are talking. There it was. Not remorse. Not regret. Reputation. Of course. After I walked out of that dinner, I didn't say much to anyone. I didn't post anything online. I didn't vent or gossip. But other people did. Word spread. Not because I told them, but because people remember. Candace told someone. Daryl talked to a few of our mutuals. And Jade, bless her, wasn't quiet about what she witnessed. It wasn't about revenge. It was just the truth, traveling the way truth always does, slow at first, then suddenly everywhere. Sierra had spent years being the center of every room. Now, for the first time, the room was shrinking around her. She said she settled? Out loud, someone had asked Jade. Right in front of him. Like he wasn't even there, Jade replied. Now Sierra was scrambling to fix her image. But I wasn't her fixer anymore. You embarrassed me, she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. No, I replied. You embarrassed yourself. I just stopped covering for you. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She knew I was right. I have work to do, I said, turning back to the car. She lingered a second longer, then walked out, heels clicking like a closing sentence. After she left, I sat on the old stool in the corner of the shop, just staring at my hands again. Grease-stained, rough, real. Those hands had done more for her than she'd ever realize. But I wasn't doing it anymore. That week, I heard from a lot of people. Some curious, some nosy, some genuinely checking in. One call stuck out. My mom. She'd always stayed out of our marriage business, which I respected. But she called one evening and said, I saw Sierra's post. The one with the long caption. I hadn't seen it, so I asked, what did it say? She said you blindsided her. That she was betrayed in public by the man she thought she'd grow old with. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so far from the truth. Did she also say she called me terrible in bed in front of half her friend group? I asked. Mom sighed. No, she left that part out. Of course she did. There was a pause. Then she said, I just wanted you to know, I'm proud of you. For standing up for yourself. You stayed too quiet for too long. That hit me. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear it until she said it. After we hung up, I sat in the backyard, letting the evening light fade. The house was still quiet. She hadn't come back. I wasn't sure if she ever would. But even if she did, she wouldn't find the same man waiting. He was gone. The next day, I saw a notification on my phone. A DM. From Jade. It was short. I just want you to know. I see you. You didn't deserve that. I didn't reply right away. I read the message twice, then let the words sit there like sunlight in a room that had gone dark. She saw me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt visible again. That's the thing about fallout. It's messy, sure, but it also clears the air. The debris settles. And in that settling, you find out who was standing close because they loved you, and who was there because they needed a background character. Sierra? She'd been performing. For attention. For applause. For strangers. But I stopped clapping. And now the stage was empty. Somewhere between the silence of my house and the constant ringing of my phone, I started to realize how alone I really was. Not lonely, but alone. There's a difference. Loneliness feels like you're searching for someone to save you. Being alone feels like finally noticing no one ever tried. It was maybe a week and a half after that dinner when Jade reached out. Her message was short. Can I stop by the shop? Just to talk. I stared at the text longer than I should have. Jade and I were never close. We were friendly, she was Daryl's wife, and we saw each other often enough that we developed a rhythm. But she was Sierra's friend first. That's how I knew her. That's how she entered my life. Still, something about her message didn't feel nosy or dramatic. It felt real. I texted back. Yeah, after 5. Place quiets down by then. She showed up right on time. Hair tied back in a low bun, jeans, jacket, no makeup. Just herself. And I could tell she wasn't there to stir anything. She walked into the garage like she didn't need an audience, like her presence wasn't a performance. I wiped my hands on a towel and nodded toward the little break area we'd set up. Mini fridge, old couch, coffee table littered with old magazines and a box of spark plugs. She didn't complain, just sat. "You look tired," she said. I chuckled. "That obvious?" "It's in your eyes," she said. "You look like someone who's been carrying too much for too long." I sat across from her. "You didn't come here to check on Sierra's reputation, did you?" Her eyes didn't flinch. "I'm not here for her." Silence stretched between us. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that makes space for honesty. "She was wrong," she said finally. "At dinner." What she said, how she said it wasn't funny. It was cruel. I didn't speak. "I thought maybe you'd storm out," she added. "Or flip the table. But the way you stayed calm? Walked out with your head up?" "I don't know, Malik. That shook a lot of people." I leaned back. "Funny. I didn't do it for them." "I know," she said. "That's what made it powerful." For a moment, I looked at her like I was seeing her for the first time, not as Sierra's friend or Daryl's wife, but as someone who saw me when others didn't. Someone who sat in that awkward dinner and actually heard the sound of me breaking, even if I didn't raise my voice. "She ever apologized to you?" Jade asked. I shook my head, not in a way that mattered. "Yeah," she said, exhaling. "That sounds like her." I studied her face, calm, thoughtful. She wasn't there to start anything, just to witness something. And honestly, I needed that more than I realized. "You ever think," I said, "about how long you can live with someone and still feel invisible?" Jade looked down, smiled softly, sadly. More than I'd like to admit. There it was. The unspoken truth between us. We were two people who'd been applauded for being supportive, praised for being easy. But underneath that calm exterior were bruises. Little emotional dents from years of being taken for granted. "We've always had respect between us," she said. "I noticed that. You never made it weird. Never flirted or crossed a line. You always kept your space." "That's how it's supposed to be," I replied. She nodded. "Still, you should know. You're one of the few men I've seen stay grounded through something like this. It matters." I didn't know what to say to that. I hadn't expected praise. I wasn't looking for validation. But hearing it did something. Like a reminder that I wasn't losing my mind. That someone outside the wreckage saw me clearly. We sat in that garage for almost an hour, talking about nothing, everything. We didn't bring up Sierra again. We didn't talk about next steps or what-ifs. We just talked. She asked about the shop, how business was going, whether I planned to expand. I told her about the teenage apprentice I was thinking of mentoring. About the idea of running weekend workshops for kids in the neighborhood who didn't have fathers around to teach them how to change oil or fix a flat. Her eyes lit up. "That's exactly what you should be doing," she said. "You've always been more than just tools and engines." I smiled, almost shy. "Most days I forget that." "Well," she said, standing up, "then I'll remind you." That stuck with me long after she left. She didn't flirt, didn't hint at anything romantic. She just saw me and said so, without needing anything in return. And after so many years of feeling like background noise, that meant more than I could put into words. That night, I went home, sat on the couch, and for the first time since Sierra left, I didn't feel like something was missing. I felt still, not numb, not broken, just still. Like maybe, just maybe, healing had started. I didn't tell anyone about Jade's visit. Not Daryl, not my sister, not my boys from the shop. Some things don't need to be passed around. Some moments are too rare, too sacred, to be turned into group chat headlines. But I thought about her words often. "You've always been more than tools and engines." It was the first time in a long time someone reminded me I had value beyond what I fixed. That I mattered not for what I could do, but for who I was. That following weekend, I sat in the shop alone, drawing up a flyer on a piece of scrap paper. Weekend basics, car care for teens. Saturdays, free. I pinned it near the coffee machine. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A start that had nothing to do with Sierra or what she thought of me. Nothing to do with proving anyone wrong. It was about building something for myself, for others who'd been ignored or overlooked. Something rooted in purpose, not performance. And I knew that no matter what happened next, I wasn't going back. Not to silence. Not to being invisible. Not to being less. It didn't take long for the whispers to turn into conversations. And it didn't take long after that for those conversations to grow legs and start walking through every room Sierra had once felt safe in. At first, she controlled the narrative, told her coworkers I'd snapped over a harmless joke, told her family I was insecure and too sensitive. She painted herself as the one left behind, blindsided by a man who decided he was done without explanation. She played the victim like she was auditioning for sympathy. But the problem with pretending to be innocent is, eventually, the truth shows up. And sometimes it walks into a room wearing the same heels you stepped on. It started with Candace. Of all people, I thought she'd be the last one to defend me, considering how close she and Sierra were. But apparently even she had limits. I got a call from Daryl one evening while I was closing the shop. I had one hand on the light switch when my phone buzzed. "Yo, you might want to hear this," he said. I stayed silent and waited. "Candace was at this wine night with some of Sierra's coworkers," he said. "She told them everything. The dinner. The comment. How Sierra laughed when she said you were terrible in bed. Said you handled it better than most would have." "Why would she say that now?" I asked. "Because Sierra's trying to rewrite history," he replied. "She's been telling people you humiliated her for no reason." Candace said she was tired of watching her lie. That surprised me. Not because I wanted Candace's approval, but because I knew how much Sierra relied on her circle to shield her from consequence. And now, her circle had cracks. "She embarrassed herself," I said flatly. "Yeah, well," Daryl added, "people are starting to figure that out." The next few days were strange. I'd go to the grocery store and catch someone glancing at me a little too long. A neighbor waved at me with more warmth than usual. A customer at the shop made an awkward joke about relationships, then quickly apologized. I wasn't looking for attention, but attention came anyway. And then one evening, Sierra called. Again. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail this time, voice shaky, somewhere between anger and desperation. "You've turned everyone against me," she said. "I can't even go to work without someone bringing it up. You think you're so calm and noble, but all you've done is make me look like a monster." I didn't respond. I just listened, let her words sink into the same silence I'd given everything else. She had no idea I hadn't said a word to anyone. The truth was, her own words had done the damage. Her own laughter had been louder than she realized. And now that the echo was bouncing back at her, she didn't like the sound. But it wasn't about revenge. Not for me. It was about clarity. And nothing brings clarity like watching someone try to spin a story you've already moved on from. One Sunday afternoon, I stopped by a local event downtown, small business showcase. I'd been invited to set up a table for the shop, maybe promote the weekend workshops I just launched. I didn't think Sierra would be there, but Birmingham isn't that big. Sure enough, about an hour in, I saw her. She was standing near a booth selling handmade candles, wearing oversized sunglasses and an outfit that screamed, "Notice me." But what caught my attention wasn't her clothes, it was how people reacted to her. Some smiled politely. Others looked down. A few just walked the other way. She didn't own the room like she used to. She caught sight of me near the corner booth. Our eyes met. She didn't smile. I nodded once and went back to setting up my table. A few minutes later, I heard heels clicking on concrete. I didn't look up. "You really enjoying this, huh?" she said, standing across the table from me. "Enjoying what?" "Watching me get dragged." I placed a stack of flyers down. "I haven't dragged anyone." "You didn't have to," she snapped. "You let them do it for you." I met her eyes calmly. Or maybe they just finally saw what I've been living with. She blinked, stunned into silence. "I didn't lie to anyone," I added. "You did that on your own." "I never meant to humiliate you," she said after a pause. "I was trying to be funny." I nodded. "You were. To everyone but me." She glanced around, like she wanted the conversation to be quieter, but knew she had no control anymore. Her voice lowered. "You really just walked away. Like I was nothing." "No," I said. "You didn't even yell. You just left. Like I never mattered." I took a breath. "You want to know why I didn't yell?" "Because I was too tired. Tired of begging to be seen. Tired of laughing at jokes I didn't find funny. Tired of watching the woman I married become a stranger who only knew how to talk to me when she had an audience." She wiped at her cheek, pretending it was just dust or heat or anything but what it was, regret. "I never thought you'd be the one to leave," she whispered. "I know," I said. "That's the problem." She walked away after that. Not dramatic. Not stomping. Just quiet. Like something had finally sunk in. Later that week, Jade texted me again. "Heard Sierra's starting to realize you weren't the problem." I replied. "Took her long enough." She sent back. Truth always comes around. Sometimes in heels. I laughed. Not because it was petty, but because it was true. Sierra had built a world on performance. But when the show ended and the crowd left, she had no one left to clap for her. That night, I sat on my porch with Diesel curled at my feet and thought about the difference between being seen and being watched. Sierra had watched me for years, watched me cook, clean, work, show up. But Jade, she saw me. And in this chapter of my life, I finally saw myself too. There's nothing warm about a courtroom. Doesn't matter if the heater's running or if the judge cracks a smile now and then. It's a cold place. It's where words carry weight and eyes say what mouths won't. And walking into that courtroom with Sierra sitting on the other side of the room, it was like standing across from a stranger who used to know how I liked my coffee. The divorce hearing wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches or slammed fists. We both brought lawyers. Mine was Janelle Brewster, calm and sharp as ever. Sierra showed up with a man named Carter. Young, expensive-looking, and clearly not used to being told no. Sierra walked in wearing all black. Long coat. Sunglasses indoors, which she removed slowly like she wanted to be noticed. She looked like she was attending a funeral, and in some ways, she was. Just not mine. I didn't dress up for the drama. Navy sweater, clean jeans, boots. I came to finish something, not perform for a crowd. The judge called us forward. Introduced the matter. Read out the purpose of the hearing in that neutral, almost bored tone they used to keep emotions from rising too high. And then it began. Carter made his case with flair, said Sierra deserved a portion of the house, a cut of my business, and compensation for emotional stress caused by an abrupt abandonment of marital support. I almost laughed. I truly did. But I kept my face still. Janelle stood when it was her turn. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't get flashy. She just laid it out. The house? Purchased solely in my name before marriage. Placed in a trust 2 months prior to filing. The shop? Incorporated under my LLC. No co-ownership. No shared investment. The accounts? Separated a year ago. Receipts to prove it. Then she paused. Turned to the judge. Your Honor, she said, this is not a case of financial neglect or deceit. It's a case of a man protecting what he built after years of being emotionally dismissed. The courtroom was silent for a beat. You could hear the scratch of a pin 3 rows back. The judge nodded, reviewed the documentation, and said, so noted. Sierra shifted uncomfortably. She looked at me then, not angry, not smug. Just off balance. Like someone who walked into a fight expecting to win on charm alone. We took a break before the next section. Janelle leaned toward me and said, she'll ask to speak privately. I raised a brow. How do you know? Because when people realize they're not winning publicly, they retreat privately. Happens all the time. Sure enough, as soon as we stepped into the hallway, Sierra turned to me. Can we talk? Janelle gave me a glance, then stepped aside. We moved near a window, away from the others. She took a deep breath. I didn't mean for this to go like this, she said. I didn't know you'd come in like this. So, prepared. I didn't answer. I waited. I thought we could work something out, she continued. Outside of all this legal nonsense. We were together for years, Malik. We were, I said. And for a lot of those years, I protected you. I covered for you. I stayed quiet. But you stood in front of people and called me less. You said you settled. That's not something you say about someone you love. She looked down at the floor. You think I don't regret that night? I think you regret the consequences, I said. That's not the same. She shook her head slowly. You don't have to be this cold. I'm not cold, I said. I'm clear. There's a difference. She leaned on the windowsill, voice quieter. You used to fight for us. No, I replied. I used to fight alone. You watched. She turned away then, eyes glassy but not quite crying. Maybe she wanted me to see that. Maybe not. But I didn't flinch. I'd seen enough tears that came too late to be convincing. I wasn't always like that, she said softly. No, I said. But you changed. Or maybe you stopped pretending. We stood in silence. No accusations. No yelling. Just air between two people who used to be everything to each other, now standing in separate worlds. I just wanted to end clean, she said at last. Then stop dragging it out, I said. Back in the courtroom, the judge finalized most of the terms. No alimony. She'd keep the furniture, the car she drove, and a small payout from our joint savings that had already been agreed upon. When it was done, the judge looked at both of us and said, I hope you both move forward with peace. We both nodded. But only one of us meant it. Outside the courthouse, she stood at the top of the steps for a moment, looking out at the street like she didn't know where to go next. Her ride hadn't arrived yet, so she was stuck. I passed her without a word. I didn't owe her any more comfort. But as I walked away, I did say one thing quietly, not to wound, but to release. You didn't just hurt me, Sierra. You erased me. And I finally let go of trying to be visible to someone who wanted a ghost. She didn't respond. She didn't follow. And for the first time in a long time, I walked away with nothing left to explain. You'd be surprised how quiet life gets after the storm ends. At first, it was strange. Waking up without anyone beside me. No sound of someone rushing to find their heels, no loud phone calls from the bathroom while brushing her teeth, no sarcastic, "Don't wait up," when she had plans. Just silence. I used to think that kind of quiet would feel lonely, but it didn't. It felt like peace finally remembered my name. The house felt too big for one person at first. It's funny how you don't notice how much space someone takes up until they're gone, and I don't mean their clothes, or their perfume, or the dishes they leave in the sink. I mean the energy. The noise. The tension that hangs in the air even when no one's talking. That was gone now. The first thing I did was rearrange the living room. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to make it feel like mine again. I moved the TV. Got rid of the throw pillows she liked but I never found comfortable. Took down the oversized abstract art she bought because it looked expensive. I replaced it with a framed photo of the garage on the day I opened it. Me standing in front, holding a wrench and smiling like I didn't know how many late nights were ahead. I started sleeping better. Eating better too. No more skipped meals because she didn't feel like cooking, and I didn't want to argue. No more microwave leftovers passed off as dinner. I started grilling again. Simple meals, seasoned right. Food that filled more than just my stomach. The shop picked up too. Word got out about the weekend workshops I started running. A couple of neighborhood kids showed up the first week. Then a few more the week after. Sons of single mothers. A few teenagers who looked like they didn't trust anyone yet. I didn't push them. I just handed them a socket wrench and said, "Let's fix something." There was this one kid, Rico. 17. Barely spoke at first. Walked around like he was waiting for someone to disappoint him. On his third week, I asked him to help change a serpentine belt. He looked at me like I was speaking another language. "You trust me with that?" he asked. I shrugged. "You trust yourself?" He didn't answer, but he did the work. Hands shaking a little, but focused. And when it was done, he smiled, just a little. Not the kind of smile you perform. The kind that surprises you. That night, I locked up the garage, sat in my truck, and thought about how nobody ever clapped for me when I was struggling to hold everything together in my marriage. How I kept showing up, day after day, invisible in my own house. But now, these kids saw me. Maybe not as some big hero, but as something solid. Something steady. And that was enough. Jade and I still talked. Not every day. Not with any expectations. Just small check-ins. She'd send a photo of her dog passed out on the floor, and I'd send back a video of Diesel chasing a squirrel in the yard and losing. Sometimes we'd walk the dogs together at the park down the street. No hand-holding. No promises. Just two people who'd been bruised but not broken. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. It was just safe. And after everything, that meant more than any flirtation ever could. One Sunday, she brought homemade lemon bars to the garage. "I baked," she said casually, placing the container on my workbench. "You bake now?" I teased. She shrugged. "Helps me think." We sat on the curb and ate in silence. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. "I saw Sierra last week," she said finally. I looked up. She was at that boutique on Fifth, talking to someone loud enough for the whole street to hear. Still performing. Still talking like she's in control. I nodded. "That checks out." She looked hollow, Jade added. Not sad. Just like someone who's still waiting for applause. "She'll be waiting a while," I said. "She mentioned you." I didn't ask what she said. I didn't need to. "You're okay with that?" Jade asked. Her still trying to spin the story? "Let her," I said. "I don't need to defend myself. The truth doesn't need a microphone." We finished the lemon bars. She left without lingering. That night, I took Diesel for a walk around the block. We passed the houses with porch lights on, heard the muffled sounds of football games and family dinners. Life kept moving. It didn't care about heartbreak. It didn't pause for anyone. And somehow, that was comforting. I thought about the man I was a year ago. Quiet. Tired. Always apologizing for taking up space. The kind of man who mistook endurance for love, who believed being silent was the same as being strong. That man was gone now. The new Malik didn't raise his voice, but he didn't shrink anymore either. The new Malik didn't explain himself to people who weren't listening. The new Malik built something from the ashes, not because he wanted revenge, but because he finally remembered he was worth the effort. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail from Sierra's attorney, final confirmation that the divorce was legally closed. No fanfare, just a white envelope with a signed document and a short note. Your file is complete. Wishing you peace. I stared at the words for a while. Then I folded the letter, put it in a drawer, and poured myself a glass of sweet tea. I stepped out onto the porch. Diesel curled at my feet. The wind rustled the leaves in the big oak tree out front. The sun was setting slow and gold. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for life to get better. It already was. Somewhere along the way, I stopped checking her social media. There was a time I'd scroll through her pictures just to see if I'd been erased. Just to confirm what I already knew, that the man I was to her no longer fit into the version of herself she wanted to project. But eventually, I just didn't care anymore. Not out of spite. Just peace. Because when you stop chasing someone who never looked back, you start seeing everything that was waiting in front of you. I woke up that Saturday like any other. Early light slipping through the blinds, Diesel snoring at the foot of the bed, a quiet hum in the house that didn't demand anything from me. I poured coffee, stepped out onto the porch, and sat with the stillness. No one rolling their eyes. No sarcastic comments about how boring my routines were. Just me. Just the morning. After breakfast, I headed to the shop. Saturdays were slower now, less business, more mentorship. By 10 a.m., Rico and 2 other kids had already shown up, sleeves rolled, ready to learn. They didn't say much when they came in, but they didn't have to. Their presence meant something. They kept showing up, and not for applause, but because they felt safe here. Funny how that's all any of us ever want. To feel safe. Seen. Useful. Not spectacular. Just enough. As I worked with Rico under the hood of a dusty '07 Camry, I caught a glimpse of myself in the garage mirror across the wall. Not a perfect man. Not flashy. Just a man who stuck around long enough to rebuild what was torn down. And for the first time, I realized I hadn't just escaped Sierra. I'd rescued myself. Later that evening, I found myself at the park. I don't know why I went. Maybe it was the weather. Maybe I needed to stretch my legs. Maybe I was chasing a kind of closure I hadn't realized I was ready for. And as if on cue, Jade was there. She was sitting on a bench, sipping iced tea from a plastic cup, her dog curled at her feet. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. Twice in 1 week? I joked. Must be fate, she replied, scooting over to make room. We didn't talk much at first. Just watched people pass by. A kid learning to ride a bike. A couple walking hand in hand. Life happening in soft, ordinary moments. I heard Sierra moved in with her sister, Jade said eventually. I nodded. Makes sense. She always hated being alone. You still angry? I thought about it. No, I said finally. Just done. She nodded. That's a good place to be. A breeze moved through the trees. I leaned back and let it wash over me. You know, I said, she always told me I was too quiet. That I needed to be more exciting. But I think she just meant louder. Jade smiled gently. Loud doesn't mean deep. Some people are fireworks. Flashy, fast, over in seconds. You're more like a fire it. Steady, warm, always there when it matters. I turned to look at her. She didn't blush or look away. She said it like fact, like something she'd decided long ago. And for once, I didn't shrink from a compliment. I let it land. Thanks, I said quietly. She sipped her tea. I've learned something watching all this happen. What's that? That a lot of people choose loud over love. Applause over honesty. And most of the time, they end up empty. I nodded. She didn't want love. She wanted an audience. Jade looked at me. And you stopped clapping. I smiled at that. It felt good to hear it said out loud. We sat in silence again. Comfortable now. Like two people who'd survived something without needing to name it anymore. When the sun started to dip, she stood and stretched. Same time next week? She asked casually. I thought about it, then nodded. Yeah, I like that. She walked away, her dog trotting beside her. I watched them until they disappeared into the curve of the path. I stayed a little longer, listening to the leaves rustle overhead, the distant laugh of a child, the rhythm of my own breath. I didn't have everything figured out. I wasn't suddenly healed or perfect, but I was whole. Not because someone put me back together, but because I stopped letting broken things define me. Back home, I sat on the porch with Diesel and watched the last of the light fade. I thought about everything I'd been through. The disrespect, the humiliation, the slow erasure of my voice. But now I live louder without saying a word. Sierra once said she settled for less. And maybe, to her, she did. But me? I stopped settling the moment I chose myself.